Namaste, everybody. Welcome to the AIWA channel. We have Manita in the house with a few questions. Welcome, Manita.
Thank you, Abhi. Namaste. It's nice to
Namaste.
be joining you
Welcome.
today. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me your time. I do know you've had a few questions. Actually, you've got a lot of questions, but I think we'll cover each question on separate podcasts so that we don't, if anybody has such a question, it wouldn't get lost in one podcast, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Thank you. I know you have a whole host of knowledge that you also want to share with everyone, and I do hope my questions can contribute to unlocking the understanding for everyone else as well.
Including myself, most of the awareness that I shed is actually on the spot, which sometimes I don't even know myself. Now, this might sound freaky, but that's how it is. I know with
Mhm.
everybody else it's different, but with me it is what it is. So I like to be questioned on the spot, specifically when it comes to spirituality. But when it comes
Mhm.
to astrology, whether it's Vedic astrology, Westernology, we follow a certain guidelines. There is a huge difference between the both, and I know you've had a question something along those lines. So the platform is yours. You can ask your question, and I'll try my best to answer it, answer your question or your actual question in the best comprehensible way for our listeners.
Okay. Thank you, Avi. Okay, so for me, as you've indicated, I do have a whole host of questions. The one thing for me, for my understanding, is wanting to know more about the different types of astrology, the Western astrology, the Vedic astrology. There's even Chinese astrology. I've always been drawn particularly to Vedic astrology because it's been part of my life growing up. Um, when you grow up, we told to, open book for certain things
Mm,
like when you buy a
mm,
car or
mhm.
purchase a home and so forth. But at the same time, we also bombarded in society with Western astrology. So sometimes, in wanting to understand more about myself and how I fit into the world, it can become confusing. Like, what is Western astrology? How does that impact on me? What is Vedic astrology? How does that impact on me? What makes up all these puzzle pieces that contributes to the bigger picture of me and myself? um, that's where I would like to, begin this conversation or ask you questions around that. So if you can explain the key difference between like Vedic and Western astrology, I would like to learn more about that.
Okay, thank you for your question. I will try and explain this, like I said, in the most comprehensible way because it's a question which an answer is needed. It's pointless if the answer is given but it's not understood. So
Mm-hmm.
the listeners out there could be astrologers, they could be Vedic astrologers. So I'm going to explain it in a way where it's comprehensible with the masses. All right. So let's start off with. So the question is, what is the difference between Vedic astrology and Westernology? I think that's the question, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So look, while Vedic astrology and Westernology or Western astrology, it shares some similarities, but they do have key differences. So by understanding how like both zodiac approaches differ, you may be surprised to find that any attachment to a certain star sign or reading can be shaken by Vedic astrology.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna give you a brief overview of the main differences between both. I think the first one I'll touch with is the signs. So in Westernology or Western astrology, there's obviously 12 zodiac signs, same like Vedic astrology. There are also 12 zodiac signs. Both astrological systems even share the same names and meanings,
Mm-hmm.
although the dates will differ. So yeah, the dates will differ. So for example, if you are a maybe a flighty and fun Gemini
Yes.
under Western astrology, you may find that in in Vedic astrology there's a shift. You're a stubborn but loving Taurus under Vedic astrology. So Vedic astrology also considers your rising sign to be of high importance, where in the Western version it's all about the sun sign.
I hear you.
So this is a common thing I pick up with the science. The calendar itself, the calendars used by both uh, Western astrology and Vedic astrology also differ. So in Western astrology, it's the four seasons and the tropical calendar that serves as a marker for for working everything out basically. And in Vedic astrology, the calendar uses the sidereal system, which pays a lot of attention to planetary position based on constellations rather than the fixed method that applies to the Western version. So this is a big difference here. You know, it's not a fixed system like the Western version. Therefore, you'll see in a lot of my lives that I do, I will say it's not New Year's now. It's not the New Year, if because I'm
Yeah.
looking at the Vedic, Vedic using Vedic principles. But anyways, um, I'm sure you get the gist of it. And we go on to the planets. So in look, Westernology connects more with the sun, fundamentally
Yes.
more with the sun, and planets very close to the sun. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
Vedic astrology is considered to be closer to the moon. So the planet's closer to the moon. This is because Western astrology or Westernology is mapped around the solar system and linked to the seasons, which are heavily influenced by the position and the movements of the sun. But in Vedic astrology, you know, it basically takes us to other wider aspects of the galaxy as a whole. So Vedic astrology also takes into account the visible planets and the lunar nodes, that is the points of orbit around the Earth. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
Westernology will fold all the major planets into the calculation. So here we're looking at um, the moon, like we've done a discussion yesterday on um,
Saturn.
Sati.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on Sati. It's purely because of the Saturn placement in the moon sign,
Mm-hmm.
in the moon sign. Whereas Sarisati is more Saturn's placement in the chart, where in the natal chart, going back into the
Mm-hmm.
natal chart. So using the Lagna chart and not the Rasi chart, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Okay. No, I
Even the
understand.
houses, even the houses or signs. Um, there are similarities and differences when it comes to mapping out the houses under the Western and Vedic astrological systems. See, I'd like to explain it like both branches of astrology believe that the ascendant house or the zodiac rising in the east during our birth plays a major role in defining who we are. However, the difference between measuring these rising houses is different. In Western measurements or in Westernology or Western astrology of these houses, it's based on the longitude of the first house, and then everything is mapped out from that point and divided unequally. However, in Vedic astrology, each house is mapped at an equal size with potentially which potentially changes where your ascendant house would fall. So what I mean by this here, you would find in Westernology, it's a very clear cut that maybe your rising would be maybe an Aries rising.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you're using Vedic astrology, you'll find that maybe it's different. Maybe it's Pisces. Maybe the ascendant is Pisces or Taurus.
Mm-hmm.
So
So,
this will tie closely to the science. So houses and science. If we look going back into it into the actual birth charts, when it comes to
yeah.
birth charts, there are a key difference or key differences driving both of them, and I'll explain to you.
Mm-hmm.
In Western astrology or Westernology, the birth chart is based on a circle with the houses and signs mapped out in a counterclockwise fashion. I think a lot of people will understand this. But in Vedic astrology, the bar chart takes a different shape, and instead of a circle,
Mm-hmm.
it's a square. You've probably seen this.
Okay. Yes, I have.
It's a
I
square
have.
divided into 12 different sections. So even there, so I get a lot of questions. regarding is Vedic astrology more accurate? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
Vedic astrology is more accurate, but it is more complicated and less fixed in a place than
Mm-hmm.
Western astrology. Therefore, a lot of people would gravitate more towards Westernology because it's a much more easier science to understand. But Vedic
Mm-hmm.
astrology is more detailed and consults a lot more moving pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is less generic compared to
Yes.
Western readings. So I know you've asked one question, but I think me elaborating on this here would give the
Yes.
listeners a better understanding. Like for example, what would Vedic astrology tell you? Vedic astrology would tell you, or is based on placements of the planets, stars, constellations, and their motion during the time of our birth. So it is also believed to be a map of our karma and our dharma. It can shine a
Oh.
light or help shine a light on our life path, big
Mm-hmm.
important events, and even our relationships. And this is not just intimate relationships, but how we how we conduct ourselves with regards to relationships with others. All this
Mm-hmm.
information can be useful when riding the waves of life's ups and downs. So why is Vedic astrology, or I would say in my opinion, why it's so different? So I'm not an advocate for Vedic astrology or an advocate for astrology. I use both, right? But I'm
Mm-hmm.
explaining the differences here. So what is the different? Why is Vedic astrology so different? Vedic astrology is different from Western astrology. I think I've given the examples early on,
Yes.
but it's based on the sidereal zodiac rather than the tropical zodiac. This means that while the Western tropical zodiac is fixed, the Vedic
Mm-hmm.
zodiac is much more dynamic and calculates based on constellations, which change the outcome. Constellations or nakshatras.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So is
So that
Vedic
actually,
astrology the real?
sorry, that actually leads to my next question about nakshatras. Because in Western astrology, it often deals with just 12 zodiac signs. But in Vedic astrology, it's divided into, I think it's 27 nakshatras. I may be wrong.
27. Yeah. No, it's
27. Okay,
27. 27 constellations, yes.
27 constellations. So
Mm.
does that kind of influence or speaks to what your personality is in a much more greater detail? Because you're now going into 27 constellations that pertain to you as an individual, or specific constellations that speak to you as an individual.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, good question. Look, this question itself, and I think by the explanations of Vedic astrology and Westernology, it's safe to say that Vedic astrology provides much more in depth, more depth with regards to um, not just the character of somebody, not just,
Mm-hmm.
for example, what their heart desires or um, where their mind will be fixated more. It provides an overview of the person's entire life from birth
Mm.
right up until, look, it's not fixed, but the theme here. For example, um, the 27 constellations or 27 nakshatras, um, it is giving an overview, not just, as I explained, not just on the persona of somebody, but also the sectors that a particular person can do well in their career. For
Mm.
example, depending on the nakshatra you're on or you're at, for example, if you're using the Uttashadra nakshatra, here you'd
Mm-hmm.
find a person who do very well with regards to, you know, anything related to, for example, astrology,
Mm-hmm.
anything related to scientific work, anything related to technological advancements, so IT, ICT, um, you know, counseling,
I hear
psychiatric
you.
work, mental work,
Mm-hmm.
work that's dealing with the psyche, the mind. So
Mm.
for each nakshatra, there's different. Basically, it's different energies. I think that's the best way to put it. And each energy can be used to create different things in one's life. But it also paints a picture of where somebody would gravitate, in which area, or how somebody would gravitate, which areas they would gravitate towards, what would be the person's development areas,
Mm-hmm.
what will be the strong points, what where they need to put more focus more on in their lives. So it's very important to understand that Vedic astrology is the go-to route if you want to understand the bigger picture about where your planets are, the constellation that you fall under, and obviously what type of karma you need to balance off.
Mm. Okay, I hear you.
Very well
So,
explains the Mahadashas, Dashas and Mahadashas that you go through, and how
yeah,
to find the beauty in the chaos, opposed to just being in a position, okay, I'm going through a certain Dasha, and this is not going to be a good period for me, and then this already is a negative approach, which trapped into this dimension of a very low frequency, and
yeah,
the consequence of this year is dire straits. I mean, as you think, feel, you shall attract. So I think I'm hoping I've done justice to this question.
yes, you have. Thank you. So in addition to what you've just discussed, um, I also want to know, so for example, we have the 12 zodiac signs. So
Mm,
people, for example, are grouped under Leo. So from a Vedic
mm,
astrology perspective, that is then subdivided further when you are now
mm,
talking about Vedic astrology. So within that, you have the different nakshatras that fall under Leo, for example. So are there vast differences between the nakshatras that fall within the Leo zodiac, or would there be a group of similarities and then certain differential elements between all? So do you have like, I don't know if I'm coming across correctly, if you understand what I'm asking?
um, I know what you're trying to get at. Maybe the wordings are off, but I know what you're trying to ask. So let me just answer the question,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you can tell me if I'm correct or not in answering your question. So
Okay.
we must understand that a nakshatra can be broken down into three aspects, or four aspects, three aspects. So, for example, we've got I like to explain it like this: you've got the rising phase, the setting, the rising phase, the peak, and the setting. And in the
Mm-hmm.
rising phase, you've got energy of the sign before that and the actual sign the planet is in,
Mm, yes.
or your sun is in. And then you've got the actual peak, where the sun's depending on the day of the month the person is born in. For example,
Mm-hmm.
if you're born on the maybe 5th of or the 4th of August,
Mm-hmm.
I would like to explain this as a person with a strong sun placement in Leo, if I'm looking
Mm,
at Westernology or Western astrology. Now, from a point of nakshatras, you'd fall under the Leo sign under the Leo nakshatra. But let's just say Sun is still in Leo, but you're born on the 18th or 19th of July. Then this changes. You would
mm,
fall into the next nakshatra, even though you're Leo. But this doesn't mean that you don't have Leo's energy or the
mm.
characteristics of what Leo symbolizes. No, it just means you've got a bit of both.
Ah.
You've got a bit of both. So the nakshatra actually explains the characteristics without having
Mm,
you to try and put it together yourself. What Cancer and Leo, or Leo and Virgo, you're combining these energies and trying to create your own story, which is
mm-hmm.
also good if you know how the energies work or the characteristics of each zodiac. But then you got to
Mm,
take into consideration where the other planets are, and this is where it
yeah.
gets tricky. So the nakshatras explain this extremely well. And
Oh,
therefore, I use Vedic astrology as my
mhm.
go-to
Okay.
to trying
I
to understand a particular person.
okay, I hear you. So I have another question. Um, you have two people born in the same place at the same time, but would this then mean that they have the exact same personalities, or are they external influences that differentiates their personalities? For example, twins being born on the exact same day, exact same time. Well, not exact time, but like a few minutes apart. But their set of planets are exactly the same. But have they come across as totally different individuals. Um, what influences that? Is it just the you've got the astrology that shapes them on one hand, but there's other things that actually shapes them as individuals. So beyond astrology, what shapes a person? Is it their
Okay.
experiences, or what is it?
Okay. Okay, good question. Okay, so we must understand that we are on Earth, we are beings on Earth, we are governed by the planets. But that's not
Yeah.
the end all and be all. In the
Mm-hmm.
material dimension of existence, now this is gonna come from um, my awareness, Astro Inudabi, awareness by Abi. So I'm not sure if other astrologers would explain it differently, but based on my awareness, in the material dimension, we are governed by planets, which is the state of consciousness, the material dimension. Above that is beyond the material dimension. No matter what you call it, the astral realm, it doesn't matter. But
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally, if a person is born on the same day, same month, same year, overall the energies will be pretty much same that they're gonna go to. But
Mm-hmm.
what each person does with the energy is important. The karma
Mm-hmm.
will determine the outcome. So, for example, if it's hot outside, you decide to wash your clothes and hang it. You will get
Mm-hmm.
dry clothes. Somebody else might decide to go to the beach, ignore the clothes, go to the beach, dip themselves, and enjoy themselves there. Whilst your clothes is dry, the other person's isn't. But that person
Mm-hmm.
would have had a much more positive day than you. So one person would be one person could potentially complain, it's so hot, and the other person said, I had such a lovely time.
Mm-hmm.
Same experience, same energy, both
Mm-hmm.
decided to do, which is choice. Now, based on
Mm-hmm.
your choice will determine your cause. So, sorry, the effect. The cause will determine the effect. So, your karma will determine the outcome. So, therefore, two people, same placements, sun placement.
Yeah.
Oops. Same sun placement. It's just that the karma is very, very important. The
Mm.
karma is important. So, in when I'm doing my readings, I make sure I tell the actual person that this is the energy you are getting. What you do with it is entirely up to you. And I go one further. you
Mm-hmm.
know there's different states of consciousness, so I have the ability to see from a higher dimension of existence where I can see, okay, if you're going to go this route here, this is going to be the outcome and you're not going to be happy with it. But if you go this
Mm.
way, yeah, you're going to be happy with it, and from there you're going to make decisions which is like take you to a better state of consciousness, or aka a better life experience. So that is
Yeah.
the best way to explain this. Yeah, the karma is what's important. And I think we're going to leave this year for another session or another podcast. It's a very,
Okay,
very
sure.
good question. So take a
Mm.
note of this year, and I will answer this on a separate podcast because we're running out of time.
Oh, sure.
And I would
No
like to
problem.
do, I would like to do justice to this year, to this question, because a lot of people, they look at astrology as zodiacs, and they're like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Gemini, you're a Gemini. How come we're both different people? They don't understand how energy works, or what karma
Mm.
is. Most people
Yeah.
think karma is a bad thing. They don't understand what karma is. So I think
Mm-hmm.
in the next session we will cover that up. But I want to thank you for your questions. Much appreciated. And I will answer. I know you've got a list of questions for me over the last 2 years, I think. and I would
Yeah.
love to cover that all this month. So thank you very much for joining our Iowa channel. God bless you, Jay Shriram, and look after yourself.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate this opportunity for you having me on your podcast to ask these pertinent questions. Uh, Thank you very much, and Namaste, Jai Sri Ram, and we'll talk soon. We'll talk soon again and go in depth on the
Thank you.
question. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.